Okay, so good morning and welcome back after our week break. We are in Gemarah Sanhedrin and we're starting a new little subject today. We're still in the Mishnah. Let's go straight to the text. I'll put it on the screen. There it is. We are still in the Mishnah, the first Mishnah of the second chapter. You will recall that the first chapter, which only took us 4.5 years, was one long Mishnah followed by one long Gemara. This is one long Mishnah, but it's not the whole chapter. There is another Mishnah later on in the chapter, but it is a long Mishnah, and we will, as you know, the way it works is we start with the Mishnah, and then the Gemara picks apart the Mishnah and goes into the details of what the Mishnah actually means. Just a reminder, you probably don't need this reminder, but just a reminder, the Mishnah was written by Rabbi Yehuda, or edited by Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, around about the year 200, and it was written down because Rabbi Yehuda Anasi was scared that the oral law, which was designed to be oral and to be dynamic and to be talked about and decided in each generation, because of the exile after the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi was frightened that it would all get lost and we wouldn't remember the oral law. And so, in my humble opinion, somewhat reluctantly, he wrote it down. But he wrote it down in shorthand. And by the time 300 years later came, around about 500, 600, the time of the Gemara, he was proved to be right, because even with him writing it down, there was still a great deal which had been either got forgotten or got confused, wasn't clear. And the whole of the Gemara is, in fact, the discussion of what did Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi actually mean when he wrote the Mishnah. And so that's basically what the Talmud is. That's just by way of reminder. What we have done so far in this chapter is we've spoken about the Kohen Gadol, whether he can judge, whether he can be judged, whether he can give testimony, whether he can have testimony given against him, whether he can do Yibum, and all of those things. So that's where we got to last time. We got to the end of discussing the Kohen Gadol, and we just dipped our toe into the king. And we made a little comparison, which we then decided wasn't really a comparison, between the current law, for example, in the UK, which has a monarch, and this situation of the monarch of Israel. In the UK, the monarch is above the law. You can't take the monarch, you can't sue the monarch. The monarch can't be brought to justice, as it were, because it is Rex versus, or Regina, however you say it, versus the defendant. So you can't have Rex versus the Rex. That doesn't make any sense. The king versus the king. Now, in Jewish law, of course, it's God versus. And so therefore, one would expect that the king may be able to be judged. So that's why we have to discuss this matter, whether the king can or cannot be judged. So we're now going to go through all of the things that we went through about the Kohen Gadol. We're now going to talk about those same things with regard to the king. So we're over here at the on page 102, if you're following in the Steinsaltz hard copy, at the top of the page. And the Mishnah says, Hamelech lo dan velo danin oto. The king does not judge, and others do not judge him. Okay, he does not judge, and he does not judge him. Now, you are going to ask me, and I think we even discussed this, did we not, at the last shiur? What about the famous judgment of Solomon. Okay, the famous judgment of Solomon. I'm sure you all know the story. A baby was brought before Solomon. Two women claimed that this was their baby. They each had a baby. One of the babies had sadly died overnight. And two mothers came along and said, this is my baby. Shlomo HaMelech said, well, I can't make a judgment as to whose it is. So bring me a sword and we'll cut the baby in half and you can have half each. And of course, the real mother said, no, don't do that. You give it to the woman, let the baby live. And Shlomo HaMelech said,
Breaking up.
Breaking up, okay.
Echoing.
Okay. Give me a thumbs up when you can hear me again properly. No? Still echoing? Still echoing. Okay, right. Well, I'll keep talking until I'm no longer echoing. Oh, we're okay now? Okay.
That's better. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
okay. So Shlomo HaMelech said, yes, that must be the real mother, because she didn't want the baby to cut in half, and that's how he did. And that's called the famous judgment of Solomon. So if there was a famous judgment of Solomon, then obviously a king can judge. So what is this Mishnah talking about? Any ideas for those of you who haven't looked on the left-hand side of the page? If you've looked on the left-hand side of the page, you'll know the answer.
I haven't looked on the left-hand side, but it specifically says in Steinsaltz, the king does not judge others as a member of a court, whereas the judgment of Solomon was his judgment alone.
Okay. That's a fair comment. That's a fair comment. And maybe that's why Rosh Steinsaltz has written that in. Although, if you do look to the left-hand side of the page, over here, we will see in the fourth line down, the sages issued these decrees with regard to the kings of the northern kingdom of Israel. Skip a few lines. By contrast, kings of the Davidic dynasty are eligible to judge and to be judged, but they are not appointed to the Sanhedrin. So there, the bottom few words of that, the last few words of that, is proof that Julia, once again, in a previous Gilgal, must have been a Tana or an Amorah of the Gemarah, because she's got it spot on once again. They are not appointed to the Sanhedrin, but they can judge kings of the Davidic dynasty. Now, that means, what does that mean, kings of the Davidic dynasty? That means kings of the kingdom of Judah. Remember, the kingdom split into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. It's all very confusing because we think of ourselves as Israel, but really we are Jews. And Jews came from the word Judah, Yehudah. That's why we're called Yehudim. And yet we are called Israel. It would have been much, much easier if in 1948 they had declared the state of Judea rather than the state of Israel, because we wouldn't then get confused. Because when we talk about the kingdom of Israel in Tanakh terms, we are talking about the 10, inverted commas, lost tribes, the northern kingdom. Now, of course, the whole of the rest of Tanakh after Shlomo HaMelech, because of course the split took place after the kingdom, after the death of Shlomo HaMelech, the rest of Tanakh, which we will get to in Malachim eventually in our Tanakh shiur, the rest of Tanakh is written from the perspective of the kingdom of Yehudah, the kingdom of Judea, not from the kingdom of the northern kingdom of Israel. There is a book that has been written. The name of it escapes me now. In fact, Eitan Elias was telling me about this last week on Shabbat when he was with us, and I've forgotten the name of the book. There is I really fancy reading it. It's a book which has been written as almost the alternative version of Tanakh, if that's not heretical, written from the perspective of the northern kingdom. it sounds fascinating. Lahavdil, it's a bit like the book, again, I haven't read that either, and I fancy that, but I haven't got time. There was a book written, and again, I can't remember the title, which was written about how Britain would have been. It's a novel, but it's written from the perspective of the Nazis having conquered Britain and having won the Second World War, how Britain would have looked in that scenario. So it's a bit like that. So our Tanakh and our perspective on history is very much written from the perspective of Yehuda, not of Yisrael. So this idea that, or this halakha that the Mishnah is telling us now about kings not being allowed to judge refers only to kings of the northern kingdom and not to kings of the Davidic dynasty. Now, another caveat, and that is that not all kings of the southern kingdom of Judea were of the Davidic dynasty. David, Shlomo, and then some of the kings of their descendants, until they were all Davidic because they came from the line of David. But then we got to a situation where we had some kings who were not Davidic, which kings that you know about were not Davidic. They were kings of Judea, but they were not from the dynasty of David.
The Maccabees.
The Maccabees, correct. The Hashmonaim. What tribe were the Hashmonaim from?
Benjamin?
No.
Levi.
Levi. How do you know that, Michael?
Because they were the priests.
Correct. They were Kohanim. They were Kohanim. Now, the Kohen cannot be the king, not in Judea anyway. And that was a big problem because we have a pasuk that tells us that the scepter will never pass from the tribe of Yehuda. So the tribe of Yehuda was meant to be the tribe of kingship in Israel. And that's why it's confusing, because when I just said in Israel, you all knew what I meant, but actually it's not true, because the king is the king. Say that again. Have you lost me again?
No.
No, you're back. You're back again.
So the kingdom of Israel, of course, was not.
You lost you. You still lost.
Call them
It's strange though, because it's called Israel. The rabbi said it should be called Judea, but Judea is actually all effectively West Bank these days.
yeah, Judea and Samaria.
It's from Jerusalem south, including Hebron.
But the conqueror always writes the history, and we're the ones that survived. The 10 tribes got lost.
Still can't hear you, John.
Okay, sorry, I'm back again.
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
So this law that a king cannot judge would apply to the Maccabees and would apply to the Hashmonaim kings, because although they were kings of Judah, they were not of the Davidic dynasty. Now, I'm not going to go into this now because it'll spoil it for in a couple of months' time when we get to the next page, 19b, because in the Gemarah, remember the Gemarah drills down into the Mishnah. When the Gemarah drills down into this bit of the Mishnah, you'll see that the reason that the kings are not allowed to be a judge or be judged is because of a certain tragedy that occurred later on in history, during the time of the Second Temple, when a king was judged and a tragedy occurred. And as a result of that, the sages decided that it was not going to be appropriate for kings to judge or be judged. So we're not going to go into that in detail because we'll come to it in a few weeks' time. So let's just go back into the Mishnah. Hamelech lo dan velo daninoto. Now, the king does not judge and is not judged by others. Now, I've given you the answer to the question, but a question that I could have asked you before I told you what I just told you is why not? Why can't a judge be? Why can't a king be judged? And you would have all said, well, it's beneath his kavod, right? It's beneath his honor for a judge to be brought to court. And as we said earlier on, that's not true. Nobody's above the law in Judaism, and he can be. It's because of this tragedy that occurred. Now, the next bit, however, is slightly different. We're on the top line over here in the Hebrew.
Do you want to share?
Oh, sorry, I haven't shared. Yes, I will reshare. Sorry, I forgot that. And when we come back, I have to reshare. Blooming nuisance is internet business. Right, we're over here. Lo me'id velo me'idin oto. What word is in the middle of this word here that you know?
Aid.
Aid, which means, Johnny?
Witness.
Witness. So, lo me'id, he cannot be a witness. In other words, he cannot testify in court. Velo me'idin oto. And testimony cannot be given against him in court. What's the obvious question from that statement?
You've already said he can't judge or be judged.
Okay, meaning, so go on, Johnny.
So how can it be a witness or be what's the word for it? Give evidence.
So the first part of that is not correct because you can be a witness without being a judge.
Right.
But the second part that you said is correct. If you can't be judged, then there's no case that anybody could ever give testimony against you. So the Mishnah really should have just said, lo me'id, he cannot give testimony. Because it's obvious that he can't have anyone give testimony against him because we've already said that you can't bring him to court. So if you can't bring him to court, then obviously nobody can bring evidence against him because there is no case. He can't be brought to court. So we're gonna answer that again in the Gemarah. They will answer that question. If you can't hold yourself back for a few weeks, then you can look on page 19b and you'll find the answer there. But in due course, we will go through it all together. But there's the first question on the Mishnah that is pretty obvious. Okay, now, next one. Lo choletz velo.
What you said about the Kohen Gadol priest, isn't it? At the beginning of the Mishnah. The high priest can judge and be judged.
Yeah, well, that's why we've brought this in now, because first of all we talked about the Kohen Gadol, and now we're talking about the king. So in some ways, the whole Mishnah is about contrasting the positions of Kohen Gadol and king. Are you with me? So the Kohen Gadol you can do certain things for or to, and the king you can't, and vice versa. So the king lo choletz velo choltzin leishto. A king cannot do Halitza. Remember what Halitza is? I showed you those nice videos of Halitza being done in New York and in Tehran. The spitting in front of the husband. This is the husband the brother of the dead man who has no children, who is, according to the Torah, meant to marry the widow of his brother, and he doesn't want to do so, so he has to do this procedure called Halitza, which is a humiliating experience. The woman has to spit on the floor in front of him, and a shoe has to be thrown, and it's all a very interesting but rather humiliating experience, and it's called Halitza. You can't do that. A king cannot do Halitza. Why not? Why not? Why should a king not be allowed to do Halitza?
He might have too many wives as a result.
Oh, that's a good one. If he's got, how many wives are you allowed?
4?
No, much more than that.
There's no limit. Solomon had a lot of wives.
Yeah, he did have a lot of wives, and he was naughty. Let's just have a look. I will just take you somewhere.
Also, in Shmuel, one understands that David also had more than one wife.
Did indeed. Now, it just so happens that I got this pasuk. Can you see it on the screen? Or do I have...
Yep.
Yeah. Jeffrey, are you with us? Yes. Unmute, Jeffrey. And read for us verses 15, 16, and 17 on the screen.
You shall set a king over you, one whom the Lord your God chooses from amongst your brothers. You shall set a king over yourself. You shall not appoint a foreigner over yourself, one who is not your brother. Only he may not acquire many horses for himself, so that he will not bring the people back to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. For the Lord said to you, you shall not return that way any more. And he shall not take many wives for himself, and his heart must not turn away, and he shall not acquire much silver and gold for himself.
Okay, so there is our pasuk. We've done this many, many times, this pasuk in the Tanakh Shiur. When Shmuel was talking about the king,
You're breaking up.
Johnny, we can't hear you properly. You're breaking up.
Let me know when you can hear me.
No.
No. Can you hear me now?
Not really.
No. Okay. I don't know what to say.
You're back now.
There we go.
Right now.
So we've done this pasuk many times when we were learning Tanakh. There are a number of things a king cannot do, and Jeffrey has just read them out. Well, he can't be a foreigner. He's got to be a Jew. He's not allowed to have many horses, and he's not allowed to have many wives, and he's not allowed to have too much silver and gold. Let's just have a look and see what Rashi has to say about that. Rashi says, now, if you, of course, had known the Rashi, had David Marks not been in South Africa, he would have known straight away that Rashi on this pasuk says this. You probably can't see it if it's a bit small. Can you see that, Jeffrey? Or is it too small for you?
I can read it, yeah.
Go on then.
So are we talking about 17?
7, the Rashi on 17 in the box.
Okay. And he shall not take many wives for himself, only 18, for we find that David had 6 wives, and it was told to him by Nathan the prophet. And if this is too little, I would add for you like them and like them, totaling 18.
Totaling 18. So the answer to the question is not 1,000, but Hannah is right that Shlomo HaMelech did have 1,000 wives, and we'll come back to that in one sec, remind me. But the halacha is that a king cannot have any more than 18 wives. Why anybody would want 18 wives is beyond me, but there you go. And we learn it out from David. We will come to that as it so happens. I just happen to have that chapter next on the next tab, not because of that particular pasuk, but because of something else. But it just so happens that I have already highlighted that pasuk. Jeffrey, verse 8, please, on the screen.
And I gave you the house of your master and your master's wives in your midst, and I gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that were too little, then I would add unto you like them and like them.
Okay, there you are. So if you've got 6 wives and he's going to add on like them, that's another 6. And like them again, that's another 6. There's your 18 wives. So I'm going to claim a little bit of prophecy because I didn't know we were going to do that today, but I had these 2 psukim up, that one there with the Rashi. Didn't know we were going to do that Rashi, and I didn't know we were going to get to this pasuk. If you like them and like them, I got these up for a different reason, which you'll see in a minute. But there you go, all works out nicely. Let's go back to the Mishnah. There it is. You got the Mishnah on the screen? Yeah. Okay. So, what were we talking about here? Oh, yeah. So the answer is not. I don't think, as Michael Kraus says, that he would have too many wives unless he's already got 18 wives. If he's already got 18 wives, Michael, then your answer's a great answer. But he can't do Halitza even if he's only got 1 wife. Why not? Why can a king not do Halitza? Well, I gave you a hint earlier on when I described the Halitza process.
Pass nicht. Pass
Pass
nicht.
nicht. Pass nicht, yes. Johnny is right. Pass nicht. It's not the kind of thing that you do to a king. It's humiliation. We said that before. You cannot humiliate a king. You can't have a woman spitting on the floor in front of the king, taking off her shoe and throwing it, not at him, but out of the area. And this whole process of Halitza is designed to be humiliating. That's what it's all about. You're saying to the person, and if you remember from the videos that we saw, the people that watch it, not only the court, but the people watching it all shout out 3 times, Beit Chalutz Na'al, Beit Chalutz Na'al. This is the house where a shoe is thrown away. And it's a very humiliating procedure. So you can't.
What is that? Whoa. To humiliate, you're not allowed to humiliate the king because Halitza is humiliating. But to leave a woman, if he's the only brother and he's the only one who can release her, yeah, it's not humiliating to leave her in that situation for the rest of her life.
Okay. So the answer to your question is that because he cannot do Halitza, he can't do Halitza, and according to the next bit, he can't do Yibum either. So you might think that she's stuck. However, there is certainly at least an opinion that says because she is not in the category of somebody who can have Yibum done with her, and because she's not somebody who is in the category of somebody who does Halitza, then she is not forbidden to anybody else, because she's only forbidden to anybody else because she has to marry the brother of her widow, of her husband, right? Now, if she can't marry that, then she's not.
You've gone again. That's an understatement, Jeffrey.
So so according to this opinion, at least, Hannah, your objection is taken into account, and she's then free to marry. Now, the widow of a king is a different story, and we'll come to that in a minute. So the reason we do not do, the king does not do Halitza is because, as Johnny Halpin quite rightly says, pasnished. It is not the kind of thing that you do to a king to humiliate a king. It's just not the thing to do. And then the next bit is velo choltzin leishto, and his widow, if he dies childless, she does not have chalitza done to her. Okay, and why not?
That child would become king.
Oh, that's a good thing. Because the child would become the king, because he is considered to be the son of the dead king. Yeah? Is that your reasoning, Hannah?
Yes.
Okay, I never thought of that. Okay, maybe that's a reason. It's not the reason that is given in the Gemarah. The reason given in the Gemarah is a similar reason that we've just said. Pasnished. You can't be having a commoner doing Yibum or Halitza with the king's widow. Pasnished. Okay. The other thing is, if he can't do Halitza, then Halitza can't be done with his wife. It's almost like a quid pro quo, and it's joined in with the next bit, which we'll just say right now and then come back to discuss it. Lo miyabem v'lo yemab min leishto. He doesn't do yibum with his dead brother's wife. We just said about that the same reason we just said before, that if you can't do chalitza, and we said you can't do chalitza because pasnished, it's not a thing a king can't humiliate a king. Then if you can't do chalitza, you can't do yibum, because the two things are intimately connected. All right. So if you can't do chalitza, he would be forced to do yibum. So therefore, the halacha is, if you can't do chalitza, if there's no get out clause, then you are not forced to do yibum. So the king does not come into the category of yibum, of marrying his brother's widow. And you'll see why in a second, another reason why in a second. And therefore, the same reason applies. If he can't do Yibum, you can't do Yibum with his wife. Now,
Yibum is when you have to marry your sister-in-law.
When you have to marry your sister-in-law, that's right.
I'm just reading about it, I just called it up because I wasn't sure what it meant. It's got the chief rabbinate as bandits in Israel.
Correct. You know, not just in Israel. I mean, I think the Sephardim might still do it, but Sephardim have not done Yibum. It's been Ois Yibum for generations. Therefore, we do Halitza. That's why we do Halitza, because you have to do Halitza if you're not going to do Yibum. So now, why can you not do Halitza with the king's widow? Why can the king's brother not do? Why can the king's brother not do Yibum? Why can the king's brother not marry the widow of the king?
I had my reason.
Say that again, Hannah.
I said I had my reason, because the child will become royalty.
All right. There is only one way that the widow of a king can have Yibum done. In other words, only one situation where she is allowed to marry the brother of the dead king. Who has got lateral thinking here? Julia, I'm relying on you.
She's infertile.
Well, we know that. She's already, well, we don't know.
We don't know.
She's died before she can prove her fertility. Yeah. Anyway.
Right. Okay.
Shall I tell you? Or you want some more thinking time?
Well, did Julian say that maybe the marriage wasn't consummated?
No, well, let's assume it was. That only really applies with the Kohen Gadol, because it's only the Kohen Gadol that has to marry a Betulah, a virgin. I shall tell you, the king's widow is not allowed to marry anyone except another king. Why? Pasnished, right? Pasnished. You can't have...
But wouldn't the brother of the king become king? Yeah.
Not necessarily. But if he did become king, that's the one situation where she could do, where Yibum could be done, because he's the king. The widow of a king can only marry another king. So if the brother of the king, see, of course, there may be a different brother that becomes king, Julia. Okay, so there may be another king that becomes another.
But wouldn't that brother? Well, wait a minute. So, in which pecking order are the brothers obligated to marry the widow?
I'm not sure, but it's a good question. I'm not sure if there is a pecking order. You'd have thought there was, wouldn't you? I don't know. I'll have to look that up. I don't know. But if the brother who is going to be the king becomes the king, then he can do Yibum, because she's allowed to marry another king, but she's not allowed to marry a commoner. You can't have, if God forbid, King Charles dies of his cancer, Queen Camilla cannot go and marry, if she was Jewish and this was Jewish law, she would not be allowed to go and marry a commoner, because pasnished. Okay, it's not the done thing. So, where are we up to? So, this king of ours, he does not do Halitza, and he can't have Halitza done to his wife, because that's humiliating. Because he can't do Halitza, you can't do Yibum. And another reason is because a widow of a king can only marry another king. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, not true. He is a dissenting view. Rabbi Yehuda says, Im ratza lachlotz oliyabein zachor latov. If he wants to, he can, and it is considered a good thing. Zachor latov. He is remembered for good. Where do you see those words? Zachor latov. You will have seen it coming up in the next.
Can't hear you, Johnny.
Can you hear me now? No? Okay. I am. For tell me when you can hear me, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. I'll keep on talking until you can hear me. Julia's got, her ears are hurting from my echoey voice. Can you hear me yet?
No.
No, you can't hear me yet?
Yes, are you back now?
So the Mishnah says, if he wants to do Halitza or Yibum, he's allowed to. It's his prerogative. He can choose. The first part of the Mishnah said he's not allowed, for the reasons that we said. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that if he wants to, he can. And not only that, if he wants to, Zachor Latov, he is remembered for good. I asked you the question before I went wobbly. I asked you the question, where are you going to sing those words, Zachor Latov, in the next month?
Rosh Chodesh benching.
Mordechai.
Mordechai, yes. And who was Zachor Latov, Hannah? Who was remembered for good?
Esther.
No.
It's not the two guards.
Not one of the two guards. No, Zeresh. Not Zeresh. The two guards were Bigtan Vateresh. They were hanged. No, one of Esther's. What do you call it? Attendants. One of the king's attendants, whose name was Charvona. Remember him?
No.
Charvona Zachor Latov. Charvona is remembered for good. Why was he remembered for good? Because if you look in the Megillah, I haven't got this up to show you right now, but if you look in the Megillah, it's in about guessing now, about chapter 7, maybe, you'll find that when they're at the party and Esther says, there is somebody here who wants to kill me and to kill all my people, and the king says, Mi huzer ve'ezer hu? Who is this terrible person that wants to do this thing? And Esther says, Haman hara hazeh, this evil Haman. And what happens is the king gets really angry and storms off in the garden, and then comes back. And Charvona says, hey, king, look, there's the gallows that Haman has made ready to hang Mordecai. And the king says, good idea, Charvona, hang Haman on those gallows. So the fact that Charvona brought the attention of the king to the gallows was responsible for the immediate hanging of Mordecai, of Haman, before Achashverosh could change his mind. So we say in that song, Shoshanat Yaakov, Orna Zachor Latov. We remember Charvona for good because he facilitated the immediate dispatch of Haman before Achashverosh had chance to change his mind. Because we do know, don't we, that Achashverosh was a bit, what's the word? A bit precipitous.
Ambivalent?
Yeah, he was a bit precipitous with his decisions, and he kept changing his mind, and he regretted the Vashti business, and we didn't want him to regret hanging Haman. So Charvona Zachor Latov, he was remembered for good. Nothing to do with what we've got here, except that these words Zachor Latov reminded me of that, and we're coming up to Purim. So, according to Rabbi Yehuda, yes, Julia.
Well, I have one comment and one question. My comment is that I thought Hannah's explanation of why he doesn't consummate levirate, the brother can't consummate levirate marriage with the king's wife was very good and probably better than the reason that you gave, which I don't honestly think follows through. And my other point is a question.
Wait. Before the question, just explain to me your comment. Which explanation is better than which explanation?
I thought that the reason that she to do with having a child was a good explanation, but I don't understand really why about the brothers, because if the brother becomes king, then why doesn't the brother marry the king's wife? There's no good reason. But my question is, how come Rabbi Yehuda is commenting in a Mishnah when I thought Rabbi Yehuda was at the time of the Gemarah?
There are more than one Rabbi Yehuda. There's a Rav Yehuda and a Rebbe Yehuda. This Rebbe Yehuda is a Tana. He was at the time of the Mishnah. There is an Amorah, and he is a different person. You're quite right. The Amoraim were a few hundred years later. Of course, Yehuda is quite a common name, and so it's a fair question, but a simple answer. Different person. Okay, let's go back to your comment. I think you're right. I think that the Mishnah doesn't talk about it, and that's why, of course, we needed the Gemarah, because Rabbi Yehuda Nossi could not put everything in the Mishnah, couldn't put every single case in. That's why the Gemarah comes along and discusses all sorts of things, and therefore our case where the brother becomes a king, at least according to one opinion, I'm not sure which opinion it is now off the top of my head, but there is one opinion that Yibum can be done. Halitza, no, because that's pasnished. But the opinion that says not doing Halitza does not preclude Yibum, because there is an opinion that says if you can't do one, you can't do the other because they come as a package, right? If you don't go according to that opinion, then it would be permissible for the brother who becomes king to marry the widow, and probably go further than that, and it would be Zachor Latov. It would be a good thing. And perhaps, I don't know, maybe we'll find this out in the Gemarah. Perhaps that is the situation that Rabbi Yehuda is talking about. Could be.
You're frozen again. I think he could star in a Disney movie.
I think we should meet in person. While I know that you're in England, I know that, but you can listen to the recording, which I often do, and I think it would be easier.
No, it wouldn't,
just
because what
temporarily, while the builder is there.
No, but you can't. The problem is that if you're
Can't
on Zoom,
contribute.
you can't hear any of the questions. You can only hear the answers. So therefore, it's a waste of time. So every time you ask a question of Johnny, we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know that. We'd know the answer. We wouldn't know what the question was.
Question could be repeated.
Yeah, it doesn't work very well.
Johnny should move next door instead of while they're doing the work. Why don't you move next door, Johnny, while they're doing the work? It might be easier there.
Might be right. I'm going to try, actually. I'm going to try on Sunday. I'm going to try it off my laptop and a hotspot rather than this, and see if it makes a difference. We'll try. So what I was saying is, it may well be we get to the Gemarah that remember the Gemarah often tries to combine the opinion, so there actually isn't a machloket. It could well be that the opinion will be that Rabbi Yehuda's statement here is only in a situation where it's the king's the brother that becomes the king, and in that situation he can if he wants. There is the opinion that says no Halitza, no Yibum, so you can't do either. But we'll see when we get to the Gemarah. Let's just finish off. Let's just finish this little bit. We've got 5 minutes left. He also says, Amru lo, so the sages said to him, wait a minute, Rabbi Yehuda, you may be right that technically the king can, if he wants, do Yibum or Halitza. In other words, he can be mochel on his kavod. You can say, I don't mind if you spit in front of me. I don't mind, having my, if I die, my wife should do Yibum or Halitza. Says the sages, if he says he wants to do that, Ein shomin lo. We don't listen to him, because it's not all about the individual. Okay, it's about the position. The sages say it's okay if you don't want to stand on your covered, right? You want to be a very humble person. You're a humble guy, and you say, look, I don't mind if somebody spits in front of me and chucks their shoe at me and what have you. That's fine. I'm not bothered about my honor. The sages say, no, it's not about your honor. It's about the honor of the position, right? And I may have told you this before. I think I mentioned it in the. I think I mentioned it in one of the other shiur, maybe the tefillah shiur. There was a chavrusa of mine way back in the 80s, chap called Rabbi Philip Lefkowitz, who was the rabbi of Whitefield shul back in the day. He was and he used to wear all the gear, the canonicals, the big hat, the long gown, and the white little bib, that long after everybody had packed it in, wearing those things, long afterwards. And I once asked him, I was very close with him, we used to learn together. I said to him, why'd you bother with all this gear? It's a bit old-fashioned, isn't it? And he said, this chevra up here, he says, they may not respect me as the rabbi, but they respect the position. They respect the froth. Yeah, it was a man of the cloth. So, they respect the cloth. And so it's about the position. It's not about the person. It's about the position. And that's what this Mishnah is saying. And he had this was his source for saying so. He had a support for what he said. So it's about the honor. So, you could argue that the king should always be, it's not pasnish for the king to walk around in a tracksuit, okay? It's pasnish for the Rav to turn up to shul with a t-shirt. I told my son that, but he doesn't want to know. It's pasnished, but you can say, I don't stand on my covered, but there's a position there. And this Gemarah, this Mishnah here, this Rabbi Yehuda, or the sages say to Rabbi Yehuda, it's not about the person. He cannot be mochel on his covered, because he can't be mochel on the covered of the position of king. That's an interesting thing. Let's just finish the Mishnah very quickly. Ein nosein al manato. no one can marry the widow of a king. Why not? Pasnisht, as we've just said. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Noseh HaMelech Almanato Shel Melech, a widow of a king can marry another king. And he quotes a pasuk. And what pasuk does he quote? He quotes the one that I had got up ready, because this is why I got it ready, not for the previous one. On the screen for you, please, David, Jeffrey, verse 8.
And I gave you the house of your master and your master's wives in your midst, and I gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that were too little, then I would add unto you like them and like them.
So who is this? What's this story going on here? This is the most famous story in all of Tanakh. Everybody knows this story. This is the story of David and Bathsheba. Okay, we will get to it in all its lurid detail in due course. And this is Nathan, the prophet, who says to him, you've done a very bad thing here, David. And he says, this is what Hashem has said. Verse 7, he says, I've made you king, and I have delivered you over the hand of Saul. I gave you the house of your master. Who is his master? Whose house he gave?
Oh.
Saul. I gave your master's wives. So that shows that David married Saul's wives. So there is your proof, says Rabbi Yehuda, that a widow of a king can marry another king, because Saul was killed and King David, married Saul's widow. So Rabbi Yehuda says, see, I've got a proof. Shekain Matzinu, there we find with David Shenasa Almanato Shel Shaul. We find that David married the widow of Shaul, Shene'emah, as it says in the pasuk, we've just quoted it, and I will give you the house of your master and the wives of your master, b'cheikecha, into your bosom. And there Rabbi Yehuda leaves it and he says Q-E-D. First Julia and then Jeffrey. Julia first.
I just had a good reason why you wouldn't consummate levirate marriage with the wife, because there might be several wives, and then which one would you be marrying?
Oh, there's a good thing. Never thought of that. Okay, which wife would you marry? You have to marry
all of them. All of them.
It's the one.
But you may not be able to marry all of them, because there may be more than 18 altogether, and you're going to have an awful lot of problem with numbers.
You're right. Never thought of that. Okay, I've got a couple of things. What have I got to look up? I've got to look up how many wives do you have to do Yibum with? That's a question, really. Even and not a king, isn't it? Really. Let's say a person back in the day had a bunch of wives, 10 wives, 20 wives, and he dies childless of all of them. Does the Yibum have to be done with all 20 wives? A good question. How many wives do you have to do Yibum with? I don't know. I'll look it up. And there was something else I had to look up. What was it? Oh, the pecking order. The pecking order of the brothers. That's it. Okay, I've got homework to do now. Okay, thank you for that. Jeffrey, you wanted to ask a question or something?
I don't think that David could marry Saul's wives, because David married Saul's daughter, and a man can't, you're not supposed to have relations between with a mother and a daughter.
So, right, where do we read that?
Beg pardon?
Where do we read that? You are right.
Well, it's forbidden. We read it on Yom Kippur.
Correct. We read it in the afternoon of Yom Kippur. Well done, Jeffrey. Shows that you're not asleep by the afternoon of Yom Kippur. Well done. So, yeah, that's a good question. However, the answer is very simple. It doesn't mean that he married the mother of Michal. King Saul probably had more than one wife. So he probably married all the other wives who were not the mother of his wife, Michal. But you're right, it's a good point. He could not have married Michal's mother.
If I'm looking at the Gemarah, at the Mishnah, it says widow in the singular.
Yeah.
which tends one to believe that he marries one wife.
No, I don't think so. If you look at the pasuk, et neshei adonecha. Neshei is plural.
Okay. I was
So-
looking at the English.
Yeah. Well, it does say here, and the wives of your master. There. See there?
Oh, okay. I was looking at the art scroll.
Looking at the the art
And
scroll.
the art scroll is translated as widow of.
Right. Well, it's the wife.
And Rabbi Steinsaltz as well.
So yeah, that's the Mishnah says he may not marry the widow of, but his proof comes from the pasuk there, Neshei Adonecha, the wives of your master. That's what we saw in the pasuk. So it's plural. Okay, I've got homework to do, and I will try. Let me just summarize what we've done here, and so that I remember what homework I've got to do when I.
Can I just ask you, Johnny? It stops there, the Mishnah. It doesn't mention anything about the king sitting shiva or anything, as it does with the Cohen a couple of paragraphs before. Does
No.
that mean it's just a regular shiva for a king?
Yeah, because the whole reason that the Cohen, we talked about the shiva of a Cohen was because
Yes.
of Tuma.
Yeah, I'm saying
A king can become tamei. It's not like a Cohen, so it doesn't have the same restrictions. It doesn't even begin. We don't need to talk about how a king has to refrain from impurity, because there's no halacha against a king becoming tamei like there is for a Cohen or a Cohen
I
gadol.
understand, but does the king just sit a regular shiva? That's all, because of his fasnished as well to sit on a low bench and all that stuff.
I'm sure you're right. I'm sure you're right. It's not in this Mishnah, but I'm sure you're right that we would learn from the Kohen Gadol about the king would not sit on the floor. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, not pasnished. You're absolutely right. I'm sure that's right.
Right.
Logic says that's right.
Right.
Okay. So we have learned about a king, about doing Halitza, about doing Yibum, about judging, and we have learnt about the widow of a king who she can or cannot marry according to the two opinions. And the two questions that I have to look up are, how many wives does a person have to do Yibum with? And what is the pecking order for the brothers doing Yibum? Is it done in chronological order, in age order, or is there some kind of other method of deciding, or is it just first grabs, or, I don't know. Okay, let's find out. I'll try and find out the answer to those questions. I apologize for the rubbish internet on behalf of Bezek. Hopefully by Sunday we'll have come up with a solution. Any other questions or comments before we go?
Thank you so much.
Okay. Nice to be back. Nice to have you all back.
Welcome back. Well, good to
Nice to have you back.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Johnny.
Bye.